I think just economic insecurity, housing insecurity, and I think there's a lot of socioeconomic gaps if we're talking specifically in this community. I think that increases a lot of the vulnerabilities, but I also think that there's not enough culturally responsive services where we have a lot of folks who do come to us. So we're a direct service agency, and we work mainly with child welfare cases. Those are in the system, but we have to work with families to prevent them from going into the system. And I think at times that the services they're receiving not only culturally unresponsive, but I think they just also don't know the Native population here. I don't think they know the history. I know they say Denver's like the most progressive liberal place, not for BIPOC, I don't think. I think there's been a lot of misunderstanding of understanding communities here. And I think a part of that kind of exacerbates those issues. As a part of it. And I think also just with the current climate of like politics, right? It's definitely taking a huge toll on those of us who understand and know oppression, right? I think those are some things, at least with the populations that it's just living security, it costs too much to live here. Yeah, it's just the systems just aren't as efficient to support what some of their needs are.
Okay. Any reactions to what Tony mentioned?
Well,
or any additions?
Yeah, so I work for a state agency, and so I also have the benefit of being both a tribal and a county liaison. So I hear things from a lot of different places. And something that I hear in general and that I hear in our tribal populations even more acutely is exactly what Jolene was talking about, particularly economic uncertainty and difficulty accessing programs that provide the appropriate level of care and support based on what that individual family or child is experiencing. In the non-metro part of the state, a large portion of that is network adequacy, in addition to cultural awareness. So if you're more rural, then maybe there's only one provider in an area who can assist you. And maybe they're booked out for 3 months and you need help now. Or maybe you don't have the ability to go the next town or the next county or even further away to access what you need. Virtual and telehealth has been really helpful in this part, but also not everyone has internet, or the internet is like good enough where folks are. So there's still sort of an assumption that because we have these non-in-person options that the problem's solved, and we're not quite there yet. And then large events are also a vulnerability. We're still not fully out of the public health emergency, and the idea of encountering something like that again, when systems may be even less adequate to handle them, is a very large vulnerability that I know I'm personally nervous about.
Yeah.
Well, Chris, to tell you, I think one of the things, there's an important distinction to make as we talk about urban communities and then our actual whatever tribal affiliations. I have kind of like double pronged answers. I think one of the stressors, as we talk about culturally non-responsive, is that agencies have a tendency to blend us all together. This is Indian solution. I look at the Dene, my mother's nation. That's a matrilineal society. And then the MHA, my father's tribe, Mandan Hidatsa, it's a matrilineal society. So, I think it's going to be very difficult to specify specific tribal approaches. I think you would suffocate under the weight of that type of
Mhm.
offering. The buffet table would be too hard.
Yeah,
But at the same point, we certainly see that, someone saying in the community that this is not talking to who I am or what I need.
yeah.
Definitely economic, of course, play a role. One thing that certainly also rears its head in the urban community is a distinct gap in education.
Mhm.
That not to point any finger
Yeah.
at anyone, but what I see also, and I don't know if this is gonna capture it, tribalism. Is that you have a lot of people like, well, I got my position as executive director of educational services for DPS. And in the 20 years I've been in this position, we have not changed graduation rates.
Hmm.
And I'm like, well, I'm gonna go ahead and keep staying in my position. Like, we need to see an attitude of lead, follow, get out of the way.
Yeah.
And, without having that type of accountability or without having that type of perspective to look in the mirror and say, I really haven't done anything.
Yeah.
I haven't changed anything, then maybe your approach isn't the right one.
Yeah.
But I think that is definitely not, I think when you talk about vulnerabilities external, that is an internal vulnerability
Yeah.
because again, you have Indians who are ascending to ranks in leadership.
Yeah.
And they're like, wow, I want to hold on to this, but I'm really not delivering on the promise of my position.
Yeah.
And it's easy to point fingers, well, I don't have enough money, I don't have enough support, the administration isn't giving me X, Y, or Z. Instead of looking in the mirror and saying, I'm really not doing anything.
Just a clarification on that last point on tribalism. That may mean a few things, just to clarify.
Sure.
So when you say tribalism, is it internal within the nation, and those who are leaders of that nation may not want to do anything else simply because they're already there and they've arrived, for lack of better
A
words.
very, very big problem on my in the MHA.
Okay.
That we have clan systems. And
Okay.
we've got a tremendous amount of nepotism.
Okay.
So we'll have the same people being elected to leadership positions.
Okay.
And because we have a constitution that requires in-person voting,
Mm-hmm.
that, the rank and file people living off the reservation can't come back and impact politics.
And also understanding that some of those tribes,
Yeah.
for instance, I'm from the Navajo Nation.
Mm-hmm.
They have, well, I guess I can speak to reservation life because that's where I grew up. I would definitely agree that we have leaders in these positions of power that have I think initially the passion to make those changes, but I don't think they have the adequate capacity building to really inspire to keep those movements moving forward. I think a lot of that is influenced by outside systems of what they think leadership should be. Things like the predominant government structure.
Yeah.
Systems like patriarchy,
Mm-hmm.
As he mentioned that Navajo Nation, we're a matrilineal society,
Mm-hmm.
but it's flipped where it's mainly our men who are in power.
Yeah.
Who are very forthright in saying oh, I support women or protect women.
Yeah.
But in their own lives, they're not doing that.
Yeah.
I can pick out anyone on the council on who's having an affair with someone.
Yeah.
When I see a legislative worker there, I can't tell you how many times I was solicited for gross things from these men.
Mm-hmm.
So I think it's really just the culture within tribal councils. And I think it's because there's this cultural disconnect of what does it mean to be a Navajo person or a Navajo man or a Navajo woman?
Mm-hmm.
Our gender roles aren't so much Western gender roles, women were told that we're the protectors of the home. Our weapons are our stirring sticks. Our weapons are keeping hunger away, keeping famine away, keeping our children warm. And our Navajo men, their weapon, are things, the regular weapons, right? Arrows, bow, but they also take care of the outside of the home. So in a sense, those gender roles were always equal. But I think with the influence of colonial systems have really created that gap in understanding.
Mhm.
And I think there's just that disconnection of like what it really means to be a leader in our tribal communities because
Yeah.
I feel like there's so much that could get done. And I'd say moving here, I think even in the Denver Native community, there's amazing leaders here who have been doing things for many years. And there's also like those types of politics at play, you
Yeah.
know, that are very apparent. When I came in, I worked in Albuquerque for over 4 years, doing anti-violence work. And it definitely was a different feeling.
Yeah.
But I think that's a good thing to point out is that it's internal too. It's not just these external systems that are at play, but I think a lot of it reflects on our capacity building. So
Yeah.
like when I went to an event with Native Americans in Philanthropy last week in Oklahoma
Mhm.
City, and they asked like, what do you need to make your organization thrive? Well, I need money.
Yeah.
But also I need the capacity building to keep these, you know, to keep whatever strategies I need, you know, to keep the organization moving towards a really good direction. You know, things are changing. You know, we're digitizing everything. You know, what does case management look like in this time? How are we working with our relative clients? How are we ensuring that we're not, you know, leaving them behind?
Yeah.
Because there is a huge disparity too, and I would have to agree with the education piece too, because sometimes like folks who come into their office may not even have an email.
Mhm.
They don't have a phone, or they don't know how to use like a digital platform.
Yeah. Technology divide.
Right,
Yeah.
there's definitely that still happens, even in this large urban area.
Yeah.
So we have to tailor our services that like meets them where they're at. So I think a part of those stressors really is like taking those things into account. Even people who are asking for help, they may become so intimidated with just the process that they won't do it. There's a lot of bureaucracy, I think, that really discourages a lot of Native people from utilizing services in the systems. There's a lot of harm that has happened, a lot of, you know, racism, things like that, that they
Yeah.
experience when these services that they say is for them,
Yeah.
it's not happening.
I just want to, real
Yeah.
quickly, we're at the 3-minute mark, so, kind of.
Is Deb on the line?
She is on the line, yeah.
Yeah,
she's-
Deb, we're working through the question. What makes your community more vulnerable to stressors? You're able to follow what we're talking about, right?
While we
Yeah, well, she's
surmount the digital
the
divide
digital
here.
divide there.
Yeah, well, one more I want to throw your way, Chris and John, and is, you know, the question of who guards the guards. Up on the MHA, we sit on
Yeah.
top of the Balkan.
Yeah,
And they've thrown any sort of EPA regulations out the door. We've
Yeah.
had not only Democrat, we've had Republican administrations who have completely disregarded any sort of safekeeping for US citizens. That, you know, we've turned our reservation into a Superfund site at, you know, the expense of national security, that we need to make sure that we secure domestic oil supply. So, you know, as we talk about external stressors, we don't have any guardrails anymore. We don't have anyone we can turn to say, we got a tremendous amount of problem with radioactivity now. There is no one that can help us up there.
this is fascinating in terms of the insight into what's going on internally. And let me just make it clear in my mind, if I'm understanding this correctly. So there are external stressors, you know, that are happening outside of the nations. And the nations are dealing with that, you know, either individually or as through your leaders. But what I am and have heard so far is that internally, there are challenges as well. And this is where I want to make a clarification. I'm sensing that there's a class system within the nation, wherein the tribal leaders are there, they have great intentions, and they're elected or they're put in their positions. But somewhere down the road, during that execution of their positions, and I'm being very careful with the words because I don't know what the words are. When I say class system, the folks on the front line, the folks who are actually impacted by the policies but of the tribal leaders, there's this disconnect between the leader and the front line and the community. And so now the whether you live in the reservation or you're part of a nation, you can't really depend on your tribal leader. You have to do things on your own, but you're also at the same time impacted by external forces that either your tribal leader can lead, can guide you, or your position in your community can guide you, or not. Am I getting it correctly? Or
It is.
okay.
And I think like what that really has inspired, I think, are these grassroots movements.
Yeah.
On reservations and in urban native communities.
Yeah.
One example, and you explained it just perfectly.
Yeah.
Also, I wouldn't know if it's class or not.
Yeah.
When I was working on the reservation, we were addressing the missing and murdered Indigenous women and relatives crisis out there.
Mhm.
And we tried to get the buy-in from our tribal leaders to say this violence is happening. Like these families are coming to us telling us that, you know, so-and-so has been missing for 15 years, or the FBI did, declined to prosecute this case,
Yeah.
da, 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 da. And there was a really disparity, and they told us to lean on state and federal data. And when we did that, they didn't have anything collected on trafficking or anything that was what they thought was related to MMIW. And I think when it finally reached the Navajo Nation, they were just calling it a buzzword. They're like, oh, is this just another social media thing? We don't need to pay attention to it. Until we had this major case in 2016 when, or 2018, her name was Ashlyn Light, and she was a Navajo girl who was kidnapped and sexually assaulted out in Chippewa. And I think like the public just had enough.
Yeah.
So we mobilized and had to put pressure on our tribal leaders to start addressing this. And I think a lot of the times it's like the Native women that lead these types of actions. And so because we weren't able to get the results we wanted with our tribal leaders, we thought they would, take this very seriously. It took the grassroots organizers, the aunties, the sisters, the grandmothers, our two-spirit relatives, to really create this movement, and we were able to establish a nonprofit to begin addressing these. So now you have community members who had to create their own search and rescue toolkit. We had community members who began taking search and rescue classes, and Four Corners Canine Search and Rescue. She learned how to work with the dogs, and now she has her own. So you're absolutely right. So some of these things that you think tribal leadership would be able to address, you have people who are mobilizing on the ground because they just can't rely on that. And I think that happens here too, in the urban native community. I think so blatantly, sorry, is definitely the current policies, the executive orders that are coming out. All of those things are, I think, new stressors that we've persevered before, but it still makes us very nervous.
Thank you all so much. Did everyone do one of these release forms?
Yes.
Yeah, but I'll walk you, so this one's a little bit shorter because we're, trying to get everything organized, but I'm gonna walk you to the next room and we'll have another group coming in. Thanks again. We'll see you at lunch.
Thank you so much. I want to follow up with you three on like one fine point later, if you don't mind. Yeah.
Of course. That's why we're here.
Yeah. Because
Yeah.
Oh, okay, thank you. All right.
Enjoy your stay in Denver.
I will. Hey, Deb. Yeah. Hi, are you the red team?
I am.
Okay.
Part of the red team.
Okay.
I took the stairs, they took the elevator.
Oh, okay,
so.
okay, yeah, welcome. Was your discussion kind of shortened or?
A little bit, but.
Okay, yeah, well, hopefully we'll be able to catch up a little bit here. Some fascinating things I've heard so far.
Yeah.
How long did you drive this morning?
I live about, it's funny, it's only I don't know, it's probably 12 or 13 miles, but it usually takes me quite a while to get here. I'm like north of Denver.
Oh, I
so,
see, okay, yeah.
It took me about 45 minutes or so.
Hi, are you? Yeah, anywhere.
We have,
I've been trying to call Deb,
okay,
but she's not responding, so.
this is mostly just so we can get the audio recorded. And we have one of our committee members
Yeah.
joining us remotely, but I'll go ahead and get started.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. Thank you so much again for being here. Appreciate it. My name is Chris. I am with the LA County Metro in Los Angeles. So glad to be here. So,
My name's Jen Russell, a member of the Choctaw Nation of Oklahoma.
mhm.
I work here, actually, my office is right down the hall.
Okay. Okay.
2 doors down.
Very convenient.
Yes. I'm a faculty member here, and I also serve on the board for the Denver Indian Health and Family Services.
Okay.
Rick Waters, Kiowa Cherokee from Oklahoma originally. I'm the executive director of the Denver Indian Center.
Okay.
And I'm Rosalie Tallbull,
Rosalie.
and I'm a member of the Northern Cheyenne Tribe of Montana.
Mm-hmm.
I've lived in Denver for 40 years,
For you.
and I'm a member of the Denver Indian Center.
Okay.
I worked in this building for 10 years.
Oh, wow.
So-
You're still currently working here?
Oh, no, I'm
Okay.
retired.
You're retired. Okay.
14 years ago.
Okay.
Yeah.
So, yeah, thank you again for being here. That's our question that I will be taking notes on. What makes your community more vulnerable to stressors? And, you probably heard from the other group earlier when you were there. There's no right or wrong answers, I'm just going to kind of start off, or anyone who wants to start off, we'll do that. And then, I will just build up, on the questions. If you hear anything that you want to expand on, feel free to do so. If not, I don't have any prepared questions, but I have some things that I heard from earlier that maybe I can explore a little bit better with you. So anyway, yeah, so that's the question. What makes your community more vulnerable to stressors?
As I told the other group, the timing of this event, this activity
Mhm.
is not a good, because it's kind of shaping
Okay.
responses to some degree.
Yeah.
But with this question, what makes your community more vulnerable to stressors?
Yeah.
The stress that's going on right now is the uncertainty in our country,
I see.
with our community. I think the community at large, I'll just say at large, I'm going to be straightforward. This is the direction I received from tribal leaders yesterday. We can't be nice anymore. Democracy is in jeopardy right now. Okay. So secondarily to that, but more important to us in our community is sovereignty of native tribes is in question, right? Okay, so what makes your community more vulnerable to the stressors? It's that unknown, the fear factor that our community is facing right now. You know, even from the birthright citizens,
Yeah.
although that keeps, you know, we keep trying to calm the community, and tribal leaders are trying to calm the community, you know, that we do not fall into this DEI mandate. We are a political legal group that
Yeah.
has a trust and treaty responsibility obligation from the government. So when you talk about stressors, and I think, you know, getting back to what this conference is about, is identifying those things. One of the first questions that came up was, is IHS going to continue to get funding? Are those healthcare services?
Yeah.
Continue to get their fundings? Medicaid, are those payments going to be made? And that's in question as we speak right now. You know, who's got the switch on the funding? We've been instructed to check every day with our federal funding source to see if we can access and download our monies. That will help our community. So I'm just gonna stop right there because I think, you know, we want to help with this research and but it's just, you know, a month ago, we would have probably, you know, gone to questions a little bit differently.
This is a slight follow-up on that one, and we'll move on. This whole thing about birthright, what is the issue with birthright that, I'll just leave it at that.
Well, if you read the papers or seen the news, there's ICE.
No, I get it, but specifically for the nations, what is the stressor that,
well, it's a question of citizenship,
I see, okay.
you know, so.
No, I just want to clarify that that's exactly what you're.
Exactly.
Because the nations are here before everybody else came
Oh,
in.
exactly.
So.
But they're not being recognized as such.
Yeah.
by our government right now, which is a huge stress.
Yeah, exactly. I thought that's why I just wanted to clarify.
Exactly.
Any reactions to what Rick said or anything you want to add?
I'd like to just say that one of the major stressors in the Native American community, and we discussed it at the earlier meeting, just the high cost of living and housing. And what is happening now will greatly impact our community members and how they handle this as it works out, and how it will work out for our community as this works its way out. Because our community is a marginalized community. We already live that way. We have those family members, community members that who have these daily stressors in their lives. Maybe they don't have an 8-to-5 job. Maybe they don't have, there's just so many things that they don't have that we don't have. It's not like you go move to the city from the Indian reservation, you get a job and you go to work 5 days a week and go home and to a happy family. That's not realistic, and we don't live that way. And our community is our community, it's our family, we depend on them. But the stressors of the daily life, aside from what is happening now, which is very traumatic, is just the stressors of daily life is very big factor in our community members as well as family members.
And then, Russell, you mentioned about they don't have that we don't have. When you say they, the community as part of the tribal nation that's looking at other communities here in the Denver area and saying, oh, you know, is it more peer pressure? Like, oh, I wish I have that kind of thing. I wish I have that kind of service. I wish that kind of stressor.
I think that's just kind of a American way of life.
Yeah.
You know, we all wish we had a bigger car, bigger house.
Yeah.
You know, that's just kind of American dream.
Yeah.
it's okay to voice that and think that way.
Yeah.
But no, it's different for the Native American community because there's so many things that we have had to struggle with
Yeah,
to even accumulate our mass in our lifetimes.
yeah.
And with what's happening with DEI,
Mhm,
the general population of America does not understand
mhm.
why those programs became as important as
Yeah.
they are.
Yeah.
And they're being done away with. I just, if I could focus on just one thing, what is happening now,
Mhm.
I'm a American citizen, I'm a Native American,
Mhm.
I've lived all my life in America.
Yeah.
And we didn't always have DEI programs
Yeah.
for our families, for our handicap, for
Yeah.
anything, school, whatever. And it took a lot to get to where these programs
Yeah.
will work for our community and for our people.
Yeah.
And for them to be so easily dismissed, it is just absolutely beyond me.
Yeah.
I heard something yesterday that really shocked me, and it was my grandson is a severe asthmatic,
Mhm.
and the National Jewish Health Hospital done away with all their programs.
Yeah.
And they're closing a lot of their urgent care
Mhm.
and everything. And it's just so totally beyond me. These are handicapped. A lot of these
Yeah.
children are physically handicapped, but
Yeah.
they're also handicapped in the health.
Yeah.
And it's very difficult. My grandson is 16 years old.
Yeah.
And he got real sick last week. He missed one whole week of school. And luckily we had a doctor's excuse for that week, but
Yeah.
now he's behind. He's a junior in high school.
Yeah.
And he doesn't, I mean, those types of programs are here for our community
Yeah.
to address a lot of issues, not just in healthcare,
Yeah.
everything. And it's just beyond me how so easily they can be dismissed so easily.
Yeah.
Is it? And I really, I don't know, I'm just dumbfounded, so.
So just to clarify, because Rick mentioned about DEI earlier, that it's not really the Native American, our nations, and you mentioned it as well. So I'm just piggybacking that one. Well, first off, any reactions on on what you've heard, Jen? And then the other one is the other question I have is DEI, that program, should that still be an issue? Because, the Native American community is a nation. And when I say is it still an issue, and it's a stressor, because you don't consider that in terms of your national pride, of the nation's pride. That what is the underlying stressor in terms of that program going away or not being part of how funding is allocated anymore.
I'll give a 40,000 foot.
Yeah.
view.
Yeah.
I don't have any, I think I agree with both of these folks. I think if we were having this conversation, it would be a lot different, but.
Yeah.
I'll just give you an example. Last Sunday, I was at a Super Bowl party with
Mhm.
friends, which none of them are from the Native American community. And, they asked me, how are you doing?
Mhm.
And I say, well, have you watched the news? They're like, no, we have no
Yeah.
idea what's going. I mean, it's like a whole different level of, people having to worry
Yeah.
about things. Like, I don't know, I'm federally funded. I don't know if I'm gonna have a job. I don't know if our clinic's gonna be able to draw
Yeah.
down money to serve our patients. Like,
Yeah.
we're going through different things than other people are going through.
Yeah.
For sure.
Yeah. So, okay, so.
I'll try to address your question, but also this one as well.
Yeah.
60 years ago, John F. Kennedy said, American Indians were the most misunderstood and least understood Americans of the South.
Mhm. Mhm.
Okay, right now, what we're going through right now, what makes us more vulnerable is just what you're saying. People don't understand, including our government,
Yeah.
White House.
Yeah.
They don't understand. And DEI, affirmative action, all of those have always been there, but
Yeah.
American Indians, we don't necessarily fall under that
Yeah.
category. I'll give you an example, University of Colorado at Boulder. Back in the eighties, we had American Indian programs, most robust on campus for supporting underrepresented groups. Okay, in the wisdom of the university, then they said, well, let's combine the Hispanic, African American, LGBTQ under the CUOP program. Soon as they did that, within a half dozen years,
It's all blended.
all blended in, and we lost faculty, we lost staff.
I see.
Students even reduced because we got lumped in. So that misunderstanding of who we are as a people causes us to be vulnerable.
Yeah.
You know, whether it's funding, just recognition, you know, invisibility is what we say. That's the definition of misunderstanding and not understanding. It's not seeing who we are. You know, here in Denver, you don't have neighborhoods that are American Indian. You don't have, you know, we're so dispersed, but we're still here. And that part that's probably most misunderstood in my mind is our culture. Our culture has kept us here for time immemorial. Whereas American culture is only a couple hundred years old. And if you ask any school age kid, ask anybody off the street, define American culture. You know, oh, well, that's Elvis Presley music. Well, where did he get his music? From Black culture. You know, it's like, no, what is your culture? And so with American Indians, we can speak to what, you know, has kept us as a people over the reservation period, the boarding schools, the Relocation Act, all the above. So what makes us vulnerable to these stressors right at this moment? I was trying to get in on it. The National Congress of American Indians is meeting right now in DC. All the tribal leaders from around the country are meeting with congressmen, but they're airing and streaming it live. And that's the main question right now is what's going to happen in 5-10 next week with our tribes. And the same questions you're asking is what these tribal members are asking their leaders and their congressmen, you know. Am I going to have healthcare? Am I going to have education? The tribal colleges, there's 34 tribal colleges around the country. And right now, the Department of Education is being disbanded. Okay. And quickly, you know, last week, just 10 days ago, you could go on the Department of Education website and you could look up HBCUs, tribal colleges, and read about them. As of last week, they were erased. So now they're not even on there. So I guess the point being, a representative of the tribal colleges spoke and said, with the funding, they're heavily funded by federal funds, executive orders and such. They could right now, some of them would have to close, and the ones that did planning and had reserves could probably stay open another 6 months. If you know, what happened last week really went forward. And so that's still not, you know, that's still being argued in the courts. And, so anyway, I guess the stressors that make us more vulnerable as a community. We're still trying to figure those out.
Definitely. And do you have anything else to add?
Just, I think just making us vulnerable is the fact that so many of, you know, our programs and what we do, the tribal colleges, our healthcare are reliant on democracy and the government. So that makes us vulnerable.
I was trying to articulate it the other day, you know, these grants we get from the feds.
You
know, we go through the exercise of filling applications for the grants and we get the grants. But more than one tribal leader yesterday said, you know, these are repayments of debts because that's a treaty responsibility, obligation. They were saying obligation for the taking of our land, and that's the law of the land. Treaties are still in place. So
is that and I'll just use the words repayment of debts. Is that a common understanding of these grants and these funding that, you know, is given to the nation?
Well, that's what's written into all the treaties. Education, education, healthcare, and social services or protection. You know, that's what's in the treaties. We're going to take your land. We're going to do this treaty in return for in perpetuity. You know, that trust relationship, I guess. And that doesn't change every 4 years. That's ongoing and it's been upheld by the courts. But even now, that's the part that is worrisome to everybody is kind of what's happening now.
But no,
That's why I say
don't-
the democracy is that.
Yeah.
Right.
I don't think it's understood by a lot of the government or funders. I
Mhm.
mean, I think that they think that, we have to compete for this money like anybody
Yeah.
else, but it really
Mhm.
shouldn't. be
I
that
never knew
way.
this. I mean, I've heard of the term, but I never knew that it's written into the treaty that this is what it is. Is Deb?
Deb, yeah,
Do you
Deb
have
is
any
on.
questions at all, or? This is now want to just clarify a couple of things with your group as well. While John Bennett is doing that, in an earlier discussion here, there was a point made about essentially leadership and capacity building, and how leaders in the tribal nations are actually passionate about changes in their nations, and then a number of times, or often, I should say, I think it's what a group said, often, the tribal leaders become comfortable, and the needs of the nation itself, are not neglected, but it's not as on top of mind of the tribal leader. I just want to clarify that if that's a perception that you have as well, or is that the reality in your own groups?
Tribal politics.
Yeah. And one mentioned it as tribalism, so that's the term that was used. So
We see it,
Mhm.
I think, it just depends on
Mhm.
different factors, but
Mhm.
yeah, I mean, it's just like the federal government, some of our governments sometimes are. They all operate differently, a lot of times, and we definitely see politics play a factor sometimes.
any reaction?
I think there is a big perception of why Native Americans became dependent on the federal government. We were forced to be it in, and to just be pushed over and pushed out the door now is just beyond our people's comprehension that we were forced into the way of life that we had to accept. And for my people, when we were forced on to the Northern Cheyenne Indian Reservation, and where we were placed is barren. It was very, very barren. And so they started trying to plan to do what they do and started accumulating a head of cattle and horses. And when the agent came from Washington, D.C., he had all of their animals confiscated. People don't know that, they don't understand that. This isn't a first time thing happening to our Native people. Things that we relied on, that we rely on a daily basis, they were forced away from us, and we were forced into this way of life in a very, very barren land. That was our people went through that area, but that was not our home base. Colorado was wide open, Colorado. And we were forced into little camps, peaceful camps with white flag flying. My own family members were killed by they were peaceful. And it's just, and now people say, well, why are you depending on the government to take care of you? Sometimes I can't even answer. I just walk away.
There's this element of environmental issues and challenges in a number of tribal nation lands. In your own nations, is that an issue in terms of the question that the rules are, or the federal rules in terms of environmental and other stressors stop at the door, and then the tribal nation as a nation takes care of itself, and whatever is out there may not necessarily apply to the nation itself. Is that something that's happening, or is that a stressor, at least from in your own nations? Or
I'd like to say something about that. For my home tribe, Northern Cheyenne, probably about 45 years ago, this power company built massive power plants within 18 miles of our reservation
Yeah.
with no environmental assessments, nothing, absolutely nothing. Our tribe was not given anything. And very few people had cars, vehicles, so Colstrip, Montana is off the reservation.
Yeah.
That's where these plans were being built. And our tribe didn't know anything. I went to work for my tribe, and one of my very first jobs was working with the tribal president. And he called me in one day and he said, Rosalie, I want you to go out to the communities. I want you to tell them that we're gonna have a meeting about the Colstrip power plants.
Yeah.
And I knew they were building them, but I didn't know anything about them. So I go out, we do that with my co-workers and everything. So the Northern Cheyenne tribe was one of the very first tribes that did it. I'm sorry, that's my phone.
No, that's
thought
okay.
Turn it
Yeah.
off.
It's okay.
We were one of the first tribes across the nation to do an environmental assessment, to follow all those rules and regulations
So you did it on your own? You
Yes,
really wanted to
yes,
figure it out?
without
Okay, wow,
anybody.
yeah.
without any urging from anyone. And it became a big deal. Our tribe was the very first across the whole nation, and it went to Congress and everything, and it passed. And those the people of Colstrip were all workers. It was a small community. Well, as the workers came in by the thousands building these huge monsters, they took over, and they would go all the way. Our little reservation is right here. Colstrip is right here. The major towns are right here. They wouldn't, and a major highway runs right through our reservation. They wouldn't come this way because of what they heard about our tribal members. They'd go all the way around 100 miles out of the way to get to the nearest airport and things like that, which was Billings, Montana. The other one was Miles City. And we had to live with that and everything. But after that law was passed, the people, we started working with the community and just having just a community relations board, really. And it was so funny. There was 3 people. One was my brother, who eventually went to work for the power plant.
Yeah.
One was our tribal historian, and one was me, the tribal employee. And we just started. We had one person attend our very first meeting, and that went on for about 4 weeks, 6 weeks. And we'd meet, and they were building a little community shopping mall. We'd meet there. They had one area was a little cafe. We'd meet there, and people would come along and they'd say, knew the one white lady from the community, and they talked to her. Before long, they were kind of sitting down, and we would start talking with them. And we eventually had so many people that now we started a community event there. And it's one of the most widely attended community events in southeastern Montana. But we've had to do a lot of things on our own like this, where we don't have anyone to assist us, to help us, to tell us what we need to do and how we need it, and to give the funding and everything. But communities can do that. So it's just against a big power plant.
Yeah, I know. I mean, that's amazing.
Yeah, so that wraps it up. Thank you for sharing that.
Yeah,
story,
that's an
Rosalie. I
amazing
didn't want to
story.
interrupt you. I feel like I didn't get a chance to give the final remarks, Mark, but we're going to rotate to one more room before we break for lunch. So we'll do the same thing in the afternoon, but you won't see us again. You'll be with another group of people, another group of 3. But thank you so much. We've got this recorded, or we're going to incorporate it, and thanks for bearing with us.
And it's recorded only for the purposes of capturing
that's
the exact words and for it to be put into to the notes, not.
Yeah, it's
attributed
just for
to-
our own use,
Yeah,
so we don't,
so-
so like, it's like,
Yeah.
talk about everything.
Well, thank you for moving forward and
Yeah,
holding
definitely.
this meeting.
Yeah, definitely.
Has everyone
Appreciate
signed
it.
one of these? I haven't,
I've got it. I sent an email in.
you got it?
Oh, yeah, I
Okay.
think I just.
You gave me yours,
Yeah.
right?
Oh, give you one.
I'll take you over to your next one with, it's actually gonna be with Jared.
Thank you so much.
Have a good one.
Hmm?
Doing all right?
Oh, yeah, definitely.
Yeah, good.
I'm fascinated with what I'm discovering this morning, man.
Yeah, I think the afternoon will be a little bit smoother, everyone's figuring out the building. But yeah, this is good, and being able to kind of
Yeah,
extend the time a little bit.
Yep.
Grab some stuff.
yeah. Station. Hi.
So,
Great.
it's like, you know, I know her from that.
Oh.
That was one thing that, I don't have, no one else knows about that,
Yeah,
but I do know about that.
Indian country is all connected.
Yeah, I've seen it firsthand. I have people who
Ooh.
actually lived there and bought it. And they
Uh-huh.
told me that. They kind of ran that down into the ground.
Oh, no.
She was the director at the time. And then from there, she went straight to like Philadelphia and started something over there, but then she moved back home.
Oh, dang.
I don't know her whole story, but
Yeah.
I remember the Boston part.
Uh-huh.
Stood
Hi,
out.
morning.
Hello.
Good morning.
Morning.
Thanks for being here today. Yeah, my name is Chris. I am with not a government organization called LA Metro.
Mhm.
I'm also a committee member. So
I'm Beverly Castaneda.
morning.
Good morning.
I'm Angela Parker. I'm Mandan, Hidatsa, and Cree. I'm from the Fort Berthold Indian Reservation. I'm also on my dad's side from the Rocky Boy Indian Reservation in Montana. And I'm currently an assistant professor of history at University of Denver.
My name's Sid Whiting. I'm a Sichanghu Lakota from the Rosebud Sioux Reservation. I'm a longtime member of the Denver Indigenous community, and currently I'm executive director of Colorado Native Organization here in Denver.
And thanks for the wonderful prayer earlier.
Oh, intentions, yeah. I'm glad at
Yeah.
least somebody's absorbed it.
I did.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, yeah, if I could just, I'm from Apache Dene and Ute. My father is Mike Castaneda and my mom is Nancy Ogin. I come from the daughter of both of my parents here.
Thank you so much.
Thank
Yeah, I
you.
deal with the Gabrielinos in Los Angeles.
Wow.
But so we're here, and that's our question. What makes your community more vulnerable to stressors? As you probably heard from the two other conversations you've had so far, there's no right or wrong answer. And I've heard from two groups already. I have no preset questions. We'll just start off with whoever wants to kind of kick it off, and then we'll piggyback or build up on those. I might want to ask some clarifying questions in terms of the comments relative to what I might have heard earlier. But we're not attributing anything to anyone. We're just trying to kind of make sure that the things that we've been hearing, either it's consistent across the nations or it's not. If it's not, what might be causing that inconsistency, from what we're hearing. So that's really like what the intent of the clarifying question is. So anyway, that's our question. I don't know if anyone wants to.
I'll start off
Yeah.
real quickly. I think maybe this time we'll just kind of answer them shortly and then just keep going back and forth with that, that way we.
Oh, in the add-on.
It kind of compartmentalizes it for you guys. That way you understand.
Okay.
The different answers that
Yeah.
you need.
Yeah.
Because these stressors, we could sit here and name off, all of us could go blah, 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 blah,
Yeah.
and it just becomes like, just a never ending path to stressors.
There's no preset tone
Yeah.
or whatever. I
Yeah.
mean, we'll capture
Well, we'll
whatever.
make it easier on ourselves here.
Yeah,
So
exactly.
what I think one of the
Mhm.
major stressors and things are is the dissemination of our culture throughout barrier environments like the big city.
Mm.
There's all sorts of embedded things in there that keeps our people from coming together, from our coming together and just utilizing each other as and renewing those friendships, kinships and stuff, and kind of falling back on each other for support.
Mhm.
That is, there's all sorts of mobility, communications, financial stressors,
Yeah.
all those things within there. But the ability to come together is a big stressor in itself.
Yeah.
In an urban environment, because they don't know where to go, just being lost in that large environment, within the big city, like, where do I go? Do I go to the Denver Indian Center? Do
Yeah.
I go to the Denver Indian Health and Family Services? Who do I go to be a part of that? And I think that's one of the major kind of drawbacks or stressors on our community is trying to find their fit, where to collect all this information that they need, or just help them build upon their families and their culture.
Clarifying question in that one, because on one hand, there is this what I've heard earlier in terms of the dilution of the culture of each nation, that everybody's trying to or looking at the nations as, oh, they're all American Indians. But what you're saying is that, I think, the clarifying question, is it the opposite of, okay, we recognize that we're all American Indian nations?
Diverse.
diverse, I'll use that, thank you for saying the word. Are you saying that there should be a clarity on where to go in terms of services, regardless of the lineage, the nation that you're a member of? There just needs to be that clarity, or?
Yeah, I think it's kind of a clarity and a knowledge
Mhm.
of where to go.
Mhm.
It starts off by, I'll find anybody who's is part of a native culture. And
I
then
see.
from there, I start to build on my individual tribal
I see
nation
what
or
you're saying,
culture.
yeah, okay.
So usually you can go to a space like, say, the Denver Indian Center,
Yeah.
and they'll say, yeah, this group has cultural immersion classes on
Yeah.
Wednesday nights. Go there because there's a guy, his name is Sid Whiting, he's over there and he does Lakota stuff.
Yeah.
And you're telling me you think that's your lineage, but you're not sure.
Yeah,
Go check with him first. And they come to me sitting there at that space, and then I say, well, there's someone else that's better than me because you're not from where I'm at. So we kind of hand each other off.
I see what you're saying.
And kind of until they get to a space where they're.
So the clarifying question again is, for those who are seeking, other American Indian Nation communities, and they're not, what you're saying is there really needs to be some place where they can at least start doing so, and then for them to build up, their own identity. And then once they have understood that, then, and this is in an urban environment, I suppose, right? Not in a reservation setting.
Yeah,
Okay.
I'm talking about like Denver.
Okay, all right,
An
okay.
urban environment.
Okay,
And it's,
different,
you know,
okay.
sometimes it's reestablishing kinships.
Yeah.
That maybe came originally from the reservation.
Yeah.
When two families moved up here.
Yeah.
And maybe establishing those old kinships or
Yeah.
new friendships with other people who
Okay, it's good.
are looking into the same culture as your own.
Okay.
But that just finding that space.
Yeah.
To start is usually real confusing, and then finding your self-identity.
Yeah.
That is one of the biggest stressors, I think, in all of Indian country.
Okay.
Even if we know where to go, sometimes getting that information is really tough to.
Yeah,
to-
exactly.
To extract
Yeah.
from those
Can I
spaces.
piggyback off of
Yeah,
that? So
please.
I was raised with the erasure of my culture.
Mhm.
So we have no enrollment, but I know where our last native relative who registered
Mhm.
in 1856.
Mhm.
After that, our ancestors were being killed because of the settlers who were here. They
Yeah.
were beheading them, but they were doing that to feed their own families too. So we have to understand, like, there was a lot of dynamics that were taking place.
Yeah.
And of course, yes, I was angry because our native relatives were being killed, but also the settlers needed food and water as well. So the dynamics of that, when you put people in a stressed environment, they're gonna do what they need to do to survive, whether it's causing harm to someone else and not even thinking about the consequences. When you think about that, the work that I do is the blood that's been shedded on the lands and asking for forgiveness for that. But I'm gonna go back. Being raised with the erasure of my culture, which means that we had to hide our identity because of that. So we were raised in a lot of fear.
Yeah.
We weren't allowed to ask questions. Children were to be seen and not heard.
Yeah.
So I'm the first person in my family since that has happened to start questioning, who are we? We're not Hispanic because that's a made up identity. That's
Yeah.
a made up race.
Yeah.
And my mom's birth certificate says that she was white. My birth certificate said I was white until the government said, wait, we have too many brown people saying
Yeah.
that they're white. So again, somebody makes up this system, makes up an identity of who we are. Until, what happens is that the violence and the anger and the frustration from that builds into a person to where, like, enough is enough. Like, I need to know who I am. So I originally went to the Native American places, and every time I was in Native American, you're not Native enough. Every time I went to the Mexicans, you're not Mexican enough. So I was like, who am I? Why do I keep getting pushed left and right that I'm not this, I'm not that, I'm not this?
Yeah.
So my work is the internal work where I started to sit with the earth and ask her, right? Like, who am I? So again, I'm indigenous. I say that I'm indigenous to these
Yeah.
lands because
Yeah.
to me, it gives me the freedom to be me. I identify with Apache, Dene, and Ute because that's my ancestral lineage. And I know what my ancestors went through so that I could be here. So you have a large population of people here who have no identity and they're in a crisis
Mhm.
and they're stressed because they want to belong. They want to belong to something that feeds them,
Yeah,
feeds their spirit, feeds their soul.
Yeah.
And that is something that they can go to, someplace where they can build solutions,
yeah,
build forgiveness, build awareness, but it's something that nobody can take away from us.
Yeah.
You have to understand that one of the things that has happened to our Native people is that you can have this for a little while and then you
Yeah.
take it. I don't go into your home and say, let me take your home and you can have your home for a little bit. And then I take everything from you and make you sit outside and watch me enjoy everything that you
Yeah.
used to enjoy.
Yeah.
That is how I talk to a lot of people when they want to understand how did your people feel? Oh, let me go into your house and kick you out of your house and let me stay there and you sit outside in the doghouse.
Yeah.
I mean, matter of fact, we didn't have dog houses. But how do you learn to live in a life where we can be seen,
Yeah.
where we have a voice, and we're not invisible anymore? How do you dissolve the anger and the frustration and the violence from the genocide of what took place with our ancestors?
Yeah.
Well, first of all, there needs to be a place for us where we can gather and unite because our Native American relatives, there is division in those spaces as well.
Yeah.
We need to unite in those places because of how they came to survive as well. That needs to be talked about.
Yeah. So, Melody, in that particular sense, is that the fundamental difference between, a Native American that comes from and lives in a reservation versus Native American who is part of the
Enrolled.
Denver society, part of the community,
We do a lot of work here. We do a lot of work, but then when something gets recognized federally or state, the tribal nations come in and say, okay, we're gonna take over this because a lot of people don't recognize Native Americans unless they are in a tribal nation.
Yeah.
And I understand this, that I don't mind doing the legwork because, hey, I'm here to be in service to the land and to the cosmos. That's my
Yeah.
work.
Mhm.
I don't need to be, oh, look, it's coming. If the tribal nations need to come in and get recognition from that, then so be it, because that's something that they have a contract with the federal and the state.
Yeah.
And they also have invisibility and they want to be visible as well.
Yeah, definitely.
So the thing is, it doesn't belong to anybody. It belongs to the land and the cosmos. So that's how I free myself from being attached to, I need to have the identity saying that the people who are invisible are doing this work.
Mhm.
Because they're the ones who have more power than I do,
Yeah.
only in the government and the federal. But then again, how can I put it? My authority doesn't run in that space. I'm grateful that I have a voice to be here today because I'm not tribal affiliated.
Mhm.
One of my sisters asked me to be here because I've been doing this work. She said, your voice needs to be heard.
Yeah.
So I was just like, okay, I'll just come here and just be.
But this is amazing, yeah, and eye-opening at the same time. Angela, do you have any comments? I mean, from what you've heard so far,
He made a good point about coming from like the
reservation versus urban environment, urban Native
I
American.
think you have
Um,
good experience in that
Yeah,
kind of perspective.
Yeah, so, like I was born at Fort Berthold and I lived there when I was a little kid.
hmm
And then we moved to like an urban space in
Mhm.
Minneapolis. And then from there, I ended up, going to college, going to grad school, and then finally ended up here.
hmm
And so, I grew up thinking specifically about Fort Berthold as my home. And like, I still say like, oh, I'm gonna go home. And it doesn't mean I'm going to Boulder. It means like I'm going up to North Dakota.
Yeah,
Right.
yeah.
And I think I was really privileged because I had a lot of relatives that made sure to teach me about how we're related to each other, the importance of like culture, that type of thing. And I think, when I think about, what you shared in some of the other question spaces today,
Mhm.
that sort of erasure of relatedness and like the structures of like our families creates the possibility for a huge amount of trauma to be sort of embedded in our lives, right? And I know I was protected because my mom and my aunties and my grandma especially were living out like our relationship norms like as I was a kid. And
Yeah.
that also has become like my way of understanding and navigating different spaces is like through those relationship norms. So like Sid is from a totally different tribe than me, but I still consider him to be like my relative because I know that even though this tribe was very violent towards my tribe once upon a time.
I think it was you guys that started it.
And we watched. No,
You guys were fighting against Comanches.
Because they're somewhere else.
But
It's that
Yeah.
kinship that we have, right?
Yeah,
So
and there's
it's a
like
kinship.
things that our tribes share, right? Like,
Mhm.
even just like the sense of humor, right? Like, and that ability to understand relationships and to think about, well, how do I treat, this person, who's from this other tribe, but that, I respect. I'm fitting him into like my tribe's kinship norms, right? Of like, oh, he's my older brother, right? Oh, she's my sister, right? This is how I'm gonna treat, these folks. And so I think when you take that away, that makes people really vulnerable to stressors. And then something else I talked about in another session was the loss of our language has been deliberate. And so it's not really like loss, it's more like theft. And so when we think about how do we convey kinship norms, how do we understand our relationship, not just to other human beings, but to like animal species and plant species and like the earth itself. That's all embedded in our language. And like, quite frankly, the US government made a concerted effort for like 80 years straight to try to erase like our indigenous languages. And like, if I had my way, the US would, dedicate money to saying, we are going to make revitalization and perpetuation of indigenous languages and cultures like one of our number one priorities. It's not going to happen, definitely not under this administration, but it was taken from us. Like, it was literally stolen from us, just in the same way like our land was stolen from us. And like, when you have a radical change to your lived environment, when you have a radical change to your relationship norms and your language, that is then what makes you so vulnerable to, health stressors or, that type of thing. And so, I mean, I was like joking in the last session. I was like, I don't know if the National Academies has a solution for like colonialism and capitalism. But I mean, really, like, we live in a society, right, where indigenous people, not just here, but like all around the world, we're taught that we're backwards, that we're ahistorical, or we're anti-modern, that, nothing of our knowledge systems is important or valuable or sacred. And this is like the norm. And that our languages don't matter, that our relationship structures are quote unquote backward, that our way of understanding the universe around us is like too sort of like, oh, woo woo or whatever. And it's like, there's such a dismissal, right, of indigenous knowledge and in different indigenous ways of understanding the world. And so, I mean, I don't know if any structure, I don't know if any research is equipped to address that, but I think indigenous people are. And we're doing it now, like either through like healing like our community, creating like community spaces, knowing our history, like we're all trying to make our contribution in whatever way we can. And at the end of the day, like, I really think it is indigenous people that are going to be able to address this.
Can I just, we quick, when we have at the 3-minute mark, and
Yeah.
and then we'll go to lunch. But
Yeah.
I just, Chris, if I could just make
Sure,
one quick inference here, and correct me, please. But this is, this is like a report for the Environmental Protection Agency, so they can understand how to better assess the needs and the challenges of tribal communities all over the country. And so I guess a little bit of what I'm hearing is that, because they do have a tribal liaison program, and maybe those liaisons are the ones that need to be equipped with the understanding of these differences between urban reservations, the politics between those, and the different histories. Do you think that like plugging into that, like particular role as a tribal liaison and maybe better training for those types of people
Yeah.
to mediate could be something that useful. Am I on the right track?
Definitely that
Yeah.
training it's got to start there, you know, and when it does, that person has to really look at the complete wholeness of who we are. You know, and some of the other classes I mentioned that I'm not, my whole being isn't just my spirituality.
Yeah.
It isn't just my language. It
Yeah.
isn't just my indigenous knowledge.
Right.
It's not just my culture. It's not just my knowing of the environment.
Yeah.
But it's all of those things.
Mhm.
Right.
And that person who goes out there and is working with communities has to realize that it's not one of those things, but it's all of them. And
Yeah.
he has to take and lay those things in the lap of every single individual
Mhm.
in order for them to better understand where they stand and their culture.
Yeah.
Where to begin.
Okay.
This is how you begin,
Yeah.
by being all of these
Of
things.
course.
You don't have to really, let's say, be a jack of all trades and a master of none.
Mhm.
That's the way to start.
Yeah.
And eventually you will become that complete person.
Yeah.
And that takes away all of the internal stressors of our people.
Yeah.
And now all you have to worry about is the external stress.
Can I-
would also, go ahead.
Also, I was gonna say, thank you for saying that, brother, because we don't have to divide ourselves to be who we are always. And that's one of the biggest gifts of being all of that. So we get to show up in the authentic self. We don't have to hide. But I wanted to also say too, one of the things is the big misunderstanding. Like I have to understand you in order to hold compassion for you.
Right.
The misunderstanding is that you may never understand us. The
Yeah.
beauty of it is that you get to observe us in our space, in our culture, in our reality, and that we are also here. There is a lot of beauty in that. And also understand that you may never understand us, and that's okay too. But we need to have a space where we can also live and breathe that brings security, vitality to our life and our culture for what we're creating. Because we're not just looking at our work, we work to unite the bloodshed that has been spilled on this beautiful earth and ask for forgiveness for that. So the vibration of her changes. So that when we send that message to our elders, our cosmos relatives, that they know that we're doing the inner work. Because we don't want this beautiful earth to be trapped with suffering and pain and desire and ownership.
Mhm.
Our responsibility is the huge forgiveness for the misunderstandings, because that's what the wars have been created, is the misunderstandings. So I just wanted to say that.
Yeah, I think, one of the things I would say about this tribal liaison program is that I think the EPA really needs to focus on identifying community leaders, and it may look different than in other communities. Like when you think about like Antonio Gramsci, he had this notion of organic intellectuals, and they may not have college degrees, they may not have high school degrees, but they have knowledge. And so the EPA needs to be able to advocate within the bureaucracy of the government to say, you know, this person that might be the key like linchpin of being this tribal liaison may not have a high school diploma. And, you know, there needs to be a way to allow that to exist. I would also say that this tribal liaison program should use Indian preference in hiring. And that is still the law of the land. It is still, you know, the goddamn Trump administration has not yet undermined that and
But-
use that,
Hopefully
right?
get to it. Hopefully get to it. Let's hope.
You know, and like basically
So you're saying that's not existing right now,
what?
the Indian preference side?
No, it exists still.
Yeah.
Yes, but the stressor, I mean, the big stressor is you have to, the government or the EPA looks at it and says, oh, I need her to be a doctor, have a doctorate in order to be this liaison.
I see.
And where you really need someone like myself, who's only a high school graduate, but understands
Yeah.
the people and what
Is
we're,
immersed in
yeah,
culture.
and what we're
Yeah.
talking about here.
Yeah.
You know, we're talking about fire mitigation. I'll go get you a bunch of young kids who set you straight on
Yeah.
that. Bunch of native kids, you know, talking about the environments, we'll go get you a bunch of those. You're talking about mini Wajoni,
Mm.
what is that? Oh, that's water is life, you know, that's a whole nother group of people. So that you have to be able to act in such a manner that you're gonna help these cultural aspects that need to be looked for. And there, some people have it and are able to do that, go out there and look,
Mm.
and others will just, you know, they haven't had the upbringing. They've had to go to school.
Yeah.
And so they look at it as a non-native perspective, as opposed to someone who's been immersed in their culture and, but yet is able to do these things in like, in this urban environment too, but has that knowledge from traditional people on the reservation too.
Well, I also think like with the government and especially now with like the stupid Doge or whatever that Elon Musk, right? I mean, it's like, oh, government efficiency. Well, guess what? Like true representation is always going to be at odds with efficiency. And
Yeah.
so, I mean, I don't know if EPA is in the space or the place or has the will to do this, but you know, it takes longer to find the right person in Indian country. And also, like in Indian communities, like we don't have the luxury of like writing people off and being like, you can't contribute. Like in Indian country, like everyone has a role to play because we've been under attack by colonialism, you know, for the past 500 years. And so I think the EPA shouldn't just be about Indian preference and hiring, but investing in like a really, you know, layered, I guess, like training program, that, you know, says like, you know, we're investing in you as a community member, not just sort of like, okay, you're a cog in a machine that's contributing to our goals.
I was also gonna say too, a lot of our teachings are oral. We don't write them down and we have to live through them, because that's where the phenomena comes in and changes our hearts and how we move in what we're forgiving or what we're bringing new understanding or what's bringing more compassion. And that's what aligns us. But we have to have that within our own personal relationship. Because my compassion can only go so far if I learn compassion outside of me. But if I learn to have the deeper compassion and understand why I have to forgive my father, because I want my children to forgive me, then it grows in a more intimate relationship. Then it's personal. And when I have that personal connection to it, then I can express it outwardly. Then I don't have a fear of expressing the traumas in my life. Because then I realize it doesn't belong to me. My life doesn't even belong to me. It belongs to the cosmos. But anyway, like all our teachings are oral. So a lot of our academics, people that you're going to find who have educational background, you're not going to find them in the academics of what you're used to being taught in the community, or how, you know, how we work in our community. Yeah, there's a lot of reputation, but you'll just know when you feel the connection with someone who holds that space.
Thank you so much. I think we should make our way down to lunch now, and then we're gonna do this again in the afternoon, but with different, you'll be with your own group, but you'll see different
Different
people.
questions.
The biggest stressor is not getting lunch, huh?
Thank you so much.
Yeah, you're welcome.
Thank you.
Thank
You gotta nurture native people